No.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. We are live with Henry Kaiser and Andre Cholmondeley and Andy West, and I really appreciate everyone just hanging out and waiting for this interview to start. I think we've got all our technical issues worked out. Before we get started, I just want to remind you that this is an episode of Andre's new show called Confronting Creativity. Our first guests were Trey Gunn and Pat Mastellato, and then we had Julie Slick and Beth Fleener. And this is a whole series that he's going to be running. So if you go to makeweirdmusic.com, you can see all the upcoming guests and the future episodes, as well as some pending interviews that have not gone live yet. You probably caught Andre's recent interview with Alex Lifeson, and that's really gone totally viral. You know, hundreds of thousands of views in just a couple of days. And we are working really hard at getting some really cool content out to you. So I really appreciate all of the new followers, and I really appreciate everyone leaving really kind comments. Please keep them coming because it's encouraging. And if you're not already subscribed, hit subscribe. We're going to have a lot of really cool King Crimson stuff coming up, Alan Holdsworth stuff coming up. Just a whole bunch of really neat music and stuff that you've never heard of. So hopefully you are excited to hear new music and not just talk about great music that we all know and love. So I will shut up now. Please hit the subscribe button and leave a comment. You can ask questions in the live chat, and Andre, you can take it from here.
Thank you, Anthony, and hello, gentlemen. Good afternoon, where you are.
Hey, Andre.
Good to see you. Good to see you again, Henry, and Andy as well.
Great.
And well, I'll start with. We're here to talk about creativity, but let's start with how you gentlemen are doing in this. Now we can start using the word year pretty soon, but in this challenging year for artists, for creatives, give us a little idea how you're doing and how things are right now for your art.
Andy, you first.
Well, let's see. I think I've said in emails before that I feel like I'm living completely underground and pop out every now and again just to say something like this and then go back in underground. So like everyone, we all have our stories about what's going on. But I guess overall I'm doing fine. So let me just leave it at that.
That's great.
Well, I'm missing the two most important things in my life, one of which is being a research scuba diver and getting to go in the ocean, because it's not really safe to dive, things you have to do for buddy procedures and rescues we can't do. And I'm a diver in the U.S. Antarctic program, and they shut down the program until 2014. So I miss that, but I'm having lots of fun doing music, finishing albums. I'm just mastering a new album with Andy and I on it. And I do a weekly video show on the Cuneiform Records YouTube channel. And that's a super amount of fun. I just did one with Michael Manring on bass and Scott Amendola on drums that just went up. And I'm working on one next week with Mike Watt and his MSSV group with Mike Baguetta and Stephen Hodges. And we're doing Creedence Clearwater covers and Rocky Erickson covers, which is what they wanted to do. So that's weird.
That is weird, and that's great. And what a lineup of people. So one part of your creativity going, okay, and well, that's interesting to hear about the diving, and wouldn't have thought of that, right? The buddy techniques.
I mean, if you met me in an airplane sitting next to me and you asked what I said, hey, nice to meet you. What do you do? I'd say I'm a diver.
Right.
I don't even mention I mean, I've always been a diver longer than I've been a musician, so that's my identity. Andy and I have been diving. We've been diving all over the world, haven't we?
Wow. Yeah, it's been amazing. I mean, Henry sort of pulled me into that, and it's just been really incredible.
Where did we go dive? Where have we been diving besides Fiji most recently?
Hawaii.
Hawaii?
Yeah, several times, and that was a very awesome trip, including major seasickness by parties, members of the party. But the underwater thing was just incredible. The monk seal and all that kind of stuff, and rays everywhere. I mean, it's just been amazing.
Did it change your music, Andy?
Did I what?
Did it change your music to go diving?
I guess, I mean, if you talk about, kind of weave in the creativity thing, I mean, I do feel that in some ineffable way, or some inestimable way might be a better word, your life activities really affect your creativity and affect how you think about things and how you do stuff. So sure, and also those images are so in my mind, and some of the stuff, you have diving movies, which are just really phenomenal. But that imagery is so much in my mind that it is, I think, always there.
Yeah.
That's great. What a nice segue, because that's one of the things I want to ask about, is that you've both, of course, in your music and some of the titles and Zazen and so many of your records, both of you touch on Taoist, Buddhist, influences and knowledge. So I was going to ask, what kinds of things, non-musical, that you find kind of clear the way for you for creativity? And it sounds like diving is one of them. What else would you say, kind of, if that is a technique, what else would you say helps you?
Andy?
Well, okay, so it's really interesting. Talking about creativity is a very it's difficult, because like many of the people that you had on, I mean, I've seen a couple of your interviews. In many ways, it's like, what are we talking about? Like, how hard is it to be creative? It's not hard. You just go pick up something and start hitting it, and in some ways that's it. It's just starting to do stuff. And for me, I don't ever have a problem with it. So I do think that life experience really brings a lot of energy into that kind of thing. Now, you do have to ask the question about why are you doing it? Are you being creative to try and make money? I mean, that's a whole different kind of thing than just pure creativity. I mean, and actually, if I can diverge for just 1 second, we lost Chick Corea the other day, and there's a couple of quotes that I found from him that I thought I would just drag into this. And one of them is, he says, you don't have to be a Picasso or Rembrandt to create something. The fun of it, the joy of creating, is way high above anything else to do with the art form. And I just think that's so true. The other thing is that he says, it's like, well, of course, Chick Corea died, but before he died, he left a message for someone to post on his Facebook page, and it was, it's my hope that those who have an inkling to play, write, perform, or otherwise do so. Not for yourself, then for the rest of us. It's not only that the world needs more artists, it's also just a lot of fun. So I always approach creativity from a fun aspect. I really enjoy being in that state of mind and just going there. And so I don't think that people really have a problem with it. I think maybe you just, if you feel stuck or you don't feel creative, just go for a walk.
Go for a dive. Yeah.
Go for a dive. And yes, wow, the loss of Chick, of course, permeates for any musician around the world right now, any lover of music. So we'll definitely be touching base on that. Henry, how about you on that same?
Well, I'm a strange case, okay? So when I started to play music, which was 1971, November 1st, never played music before that, and I thought of it as a science fair project. I thought of it as doing experiments to do things nobody had done before to see what would happen. So it's just a science fair project. So I went on doing that for years and years and years. And then I realized there was other stuff going on. It's always easy for me to generate stuff, Andy. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I think it comes from three things. I think it comes from, one, when I was a little kid, when I was in second grade, both my mom and dad were in the hospital. My dad was dying of multiple sclerosis, and there was nowhere to put me, no friendly relatives. So they put me in a military boarding school in second grade. It was in Palo Alto, California. And Christmas time came around, and they didn't have anywhere to have the kids go except go home for Christmas. I didn't have a home. They sent me to a wicked uncle's house. First day, he burned me with cigarettes and held me down, and his wife caught him, and they shipped me out of there, and they sent me back to the military school, and there was nothing to do with me, so they locked me in a room for 2 weeks and brought me 2 meals a day. Second grade kid, no supervision, the place is locked. If there's a fire, I'm dead. And then when vacations came around, same thing, locked in the room for 2 months in summer with a sports camp for a little break that they had there. So I think I learned to meditate, Andy.
Yeah.
I had to survive. You weren't allowed to have books. There was nothing to do. It was just locked in a room, like a cell, a barracks room with knotty pine walls. And I would stare at the knotty pine images on the wall and go into them the way people traditionally go into tantric art. But I didn't really know that. Okay. And I never thought about music as being personal expression. And then, in the 80s, I started to play with Korean musicians who come from a shamanic music tradition with Sangwon Park and other people. And they're all like, hey, you can just play this stuff. I was like, what do you mean? I'm just doing it. What are you talking about? Everybody can do that. And then it turned out that I had some weird connection to different kinds of shamanic music, to specifically Madagascar and Korean music. And I can just play it, and I just get out of the way and the spirits say something through me. So maybe it's unconscious creativity, maybe it's the spirits. I have no idea. So I never thought of myself as creative or self-expressive, but about 20 years ago, I started to say, hey, maybe I am, and I just didn't know it. But that's my methodology.
That's wow. So parents, if you want to grow a little experimental guitarist,
Lock the kid up. Lock him up. Andy, don't they call that a tulku in Tibetan Buddhism, where they take the little kid who's supposed to be a Dalai Lama and they lock him in a stone room for like 5 years?
Yeah, right. Meditate now.
Right.
Well, that's really an interesting background. It's funny. I should mention too that Henry has definitely opened some doors for me in the sense that, okay, most people know me as from a long time ago, the time with the Dregs, and the Dregs is very structured and athletic kind of music. I mean, it required a kind of discipline to play that stuff. It wasn't improvisational really at all. I mean, there were sections in songs where you could improvise solos, and of course Steve and the other guys really took a lot more solos in that context. So for me, just to be able to play something, it required a kind of a shifting of mindset. And even like the album that we did recently, well, it's been a year now, but it kind of got slowed down because of COVID.
What should we call it? Let's call it Occam's 11, just because we've been calling it that. Should we call it that? Occam's 11.
Occam's 11, yeah. There's a couple of 11s in there at least, right? And but the point is this: it was really just, we got 4 people together that we all like each other, and one person I had never met, but Henry knew him, and we all got in a room and just said, okay.
So it's 3 guitars, bass, and drums, total 5.
Yeah. And it was just like, okay, let's see what we can do. I mean, literally just start playing. And, a lot of it is kind of meandering, but then all of a sudden a form would start to take shape and you'd come out of it. This isn't music that you play in that way entirely in front of people for an audience. It's music that you're kind of exploring for yourself to try and draw something out of the ether, as a collective. So if that doesn't sound too strange, that's really what it is. And, I hadn't really had a lot of experience doing that until Henry and I started getting together in the mid 80s and doing this kind of thing and introducing a lot of different things into the stew, if you will.
It's funny, when we were making this record, Andy, I know in my case, I would reach things and find things that I play when I listen to it back that I never would have played, that I came to because of you guys and us just playing the room. I mean, I never would have thought to play what I played, like on that track Alameda Yetu. I mean, I never would have thought of it, and
Yeah.
I'm so proud of it. And it's like such a special thing, but it's like a message from the spirit world for me. It's not like something I was intellectual about or anything.
Well,
But
yeah. So the same thing with Five Times Surprise. I mean, we literally took the same approach for that album, but it was a completely different group of people. And those people were very, with Tracy Silverman and Jeff Sipe, Anthony Perog. I mean, they were all master musicians of a lot of variety of styles, and yet we just got together and on the other side of it came that album. I mean, Ed, we have to remember Ed is the producer also, and he was a large part of the kind of instigation of this. So there's these different energies that come in and it just kind of comes out. So I know that sounds a little vague, but I suppose for anybody listening, if they care about being creative, a lot of the lessons here are really just to do stuff.
just do stuff. Yep.
That-
And go for a walk outside.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great, gentlemen, and yes, for people listening, the people that write in to us, and it's kind of cliche, but you guys make it look easy, and that's a part of the thing. But I think, wow, a couple of beautiful points and lessons there, and one of them that you're both saying in different ways is just listen, train the listening. Shh. Pauline Oliveros and many other people just really try to work on that. You said that about going into an improvisatory world, Andy, and how that was different than the more structured Dregs. And also, Henry, what you're saying, I remember when you did the Madagascar, you and Lindley did that material, you spoke a lot about how it affected you. And I was surprised. I was like, wow, he's done a lot before this. And you've always said that Madagascar thing, it just opened up. Would you say that's kind of a line in your career where you really, got in touch with something?
It happened before with Korean stuff, and then that's the time when other people notice it, is with the Madagascar stuff. But we had, that thing resulted in 12 albums. One trip where we were supposed to make one album. It was crazy. And everything we tried to do just magically worked. Supposedly because we had this special ceremony with this guy Ramilison, with everybody there for the ancient ancestors, because the ancient ancestors had said that they wanted us to do it. So who knows?
That's fantastic. That's such a great series of records, folks. And I'm sure everyone here, we don't usually even spend that much time on listing records and stuff, because we got a great educated audience here. But today you can do some fast research, and the Madagascar World Out of Time thread is incredible. Andy, you had said before, and please, my friend, diverge all you want. And you said that, and you brought up Chick. And I thought that was a beautiful quote you read. And one of the things that it reminds me that I've been saying to folks the past couple of days, the beautiful message is that Chick kept teaching towards the end. I mean, I'm on his Instagram thread, and he's got a book and a workshop and a master classes. Wow, teaching. So I wanted to talk about that and start with Andy, because creativity, of course, passing it on and expressing ideas to others. How much have you done, if any, of teaching, mentoring, anything like that?
Yeah, well, okay, so I don't think I've done none of it directly, and Chick Corea is amazing. If you go and look at his discography, it's well over 100 albums. So you think about, okay, here's a man. This actually kind of is topical in some weird way. Is that I realize that as you live, you're part of a generation, and you've got some bit of awareness of the generation that came before you and some bit of awareness of the generation that came after you, but you've also got the stuff that you drag along through your life, right? So if there's someone who has never heard Chick Corea, what do you say? Here's a guy who has over 100 albums. I could point to different things in the 70s, 80s, 90s, aughts, and recently that all had an effect, or that I spent time with even. I mean, just to say, I spent 100 hours with this man in my life, and like you said, I mean, he's done things where I've seen some of his piano videos, the instructional stuff where he's talking about playing, he's talking about music. I mean, it's really inspiring stuff. Um, but there's no way for everyone to touch it. You know, it's like there's this temporal nature to learning and being who you are. And I've started to see it maybe as I get older, just kind of like as this bag of time, you know, or a slot of time. And every now and again, you can jump way out and go way back, or, you know, right behind you, right now, you know. So all these things I think are important. And, you know, the only reason I even feel like, aside from the fact that I really like you guys and it's fun to talk about this, the only reason I see for doing something like this is that someone who, you know, will either be reminded of things that they already know, or they'll go, what are they talking about? Maybe I should check this out, you know? So anyways, I don't know if I answered your question. I definitely went off there.
You did. And that's the beautiful part. And I think it's great that you kind of did a meta comment on that. Like, how can we talk about creativity? Yeah, it's a slippery thing, but no, that's a great answer. And built into that answer, you said something that, you know, Brian Eno has a quote. I don't know if he made this up, but he talks about the idea of the scenius, like genius, but scene. And this idea that it's not one person, any of these greats. I mean, because Chick, you know, you got to look at Stan Getz, you got to look at Herbie Mann, you got to look at Gary Burton, and you're right. He dragged along this whole thing, and created, and then launched so much other. It's so much bigger than him. That's why this is going to be difficult to wrap our minds around. So that's a great reminder that it goes beyond the person.
I was looking for this CD that I had pulled out and I can't find it, but basically when Return to Forever came out and when I discovered them at the same time as Mahavishnu Orchestra, I found out about Chick Corea. And so this is the early 70s. I went and found an album. This is when they had records only, right? And it was called Chick Corea Solo Piano. And it was one of his first ECM albums, I think 1971, 72. I pulled it out last night. And this was a great album. It was just him playing piano. And the music that I heard, it was beyond my ability to comprehend in any way. It was just like very interesting and like, wow, how does anyone even do this, you know, kind of thing. So, I mean, I think those kind of things can happen to everybody at any time.
Yeah. No, it's really next level. One of the beautiful things that I think both of you have done is just pull from everything. I can't think of a type of music that you've not either of you have been involved in somewhere. One of the records I wanted to zoom in on is one of my favorites of the many favorites I have from you gentlemen, the Crazy Backwards Alphabet. I mean, because that's still, it's so fresh, it's so good. I've played it for students who think it's kind of new, and that's the key for a great record. But I mean, you've got the Matt Groening connection, which a lot of people, younger people, go, oh my God, and then the direct line to Beefheart with Drumbo. So my question then is, you know, it's fresh, it's very new, and at the time it was, you know, what is this? But there's the threads of Beefheart, there's the threads of kind of ornette harmonics and things. Give us a little idea of, even though it's many years ago, it's still very new sounding. Give us a little idea of, you know, pulling those things together, where you were as a musician then.
Well, it all started as a blind date, didn't it, Andy?
Yeah.
Andy and I, there was this drummer, Michael Maximenko, in a Swedish band called Kraljer and wanted to do something with him. And I'd met Andy and we wanted to do something. And we got a blind date gig at a German jazz festival. And we sent each other tapes. We learned complicated material. And then we went to this festival, rehearsed once, not for very long, and then went on, played on stage in front of a bunch of people. And that became Crazy Backwards Alphabet. And John French, who I'd known for years, was talked into joining in. And it referenced that Beefheart material, and it referenced whatever each one of us had to say. And we enjoyed each other's company, and it was crazy fun.
Yeah, you know, that was my first exposure to Beefheart, honestly, which is kind of incredible looking back on it. It's like I had heard his name, but I never knew anything about the music. And, you know, so Henry, you started playing me some of that stuff and just kind of explaining it to me, and what's really interesting about that is if you listen to that in the context of like a jazz player or a rock player, and if you keep that tight box, you're not going to understand it. You're going to say, what is this? What is that? Is this music? I mean, I don't even recognize it, but if you open your mind and you hear it in a different way, it becomes something completely different. So playing with Drumbo was incredible. I mean, I feel very fortunate to be able to have worked with him.
It's like
his
getting to
whole
play with
experience
Keith
art
Newton.
and kind of touching into that world and understanding that, okay, wait a minute, a lot of this really isn't so much about sort of complicated harmonic structures with voice leading and very hard rhythmic kind of thinking. It's much more kind of flexible and kind of rounded, but the edges are also really jagged in places. So, just to be able to go into that was really Crazy Backwards Alphabet was my first experience to just kind of let go of a lot of preconceived notions of how to do stuff. And I should mention also that there is some video of that. Henry's been doing the cuneiform, series, and there's some stuff there where we played in Germany in 1986 at a jazz concert.
It's got our first gig. Our entire first gig was broadcast on German television, and it's there on the Cuneiform Records YouTube page in my weekly solo a couple of weeks ago where we show that. And then there's earlier stuff with John French of us playing. So that's our good video documentation, everything there is of Crazy Backwards Alphabet, a couple of hours of each band.
Yeah, that's great. Well, a kindred website and a kindred venture, Cuneiform, decades of great releases there. So that's great to hear that you've got this going on and that's up there. Wow. Andy, a little follow up on that. That's interesting. That it was your first exposure to the Beefheart thing. Now, I think Colonel Bruce, there's always to me a little bit of crossover as a personality and everything and some of the music. So was there any bridge there? Because, of course, you have an Atlanta connection to Bruce and all those guys, right? Did you hear any?
Well, here's how this works. Hampton Grease Band was, extremely influential to me as a teenager, but I had no idea that there was Beefheart before them or at the same time. I just didn't know. So the same kind of thing when I was exposed to Mahavishnu Orchestra. To me, that was music that landed from another dimension, completely. I had no idea of Miles Davis, John McLaughlin, any of that history, Bitches Brew, any of that stuff, nothing, but there was Mahavishnu, and it's like, oh my God, this is just unbelievable. So those kind of things can just happen, and I was telling someone else this story too. When I went to the University of Miami, I walked into the kind of the rehearsal room there, and there was a picture of John Coltrane on the wall. But so I'm at the University of Miami Jazz School, and I go, who's that? And they looked at me like I was from another planet, like, you don't know who Coltrane is? No. So these things can come in and they can just hit you on the side of the face at any point in life. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, I find new stuff all the time. But I'm always, I still buy stuff, still buy CDs, always looking for new things, Here's the new good CD of Taarab music from Zanzibar where they're recording it better than they used to. The guy's playing the bass clarinet. Every week there's something like that I get excited about.
Well, that African stuff that you played for me is just unreal because, I'll try and find the one and often I can't.
They don't think about a one in many cases.
No, it's there's some amazing, home of rhythm and polyrhythms, certainly one of them. I wanted to touch base a little bit on sonics and because you are always involved in really great sounding records, which that's a stellar sounding record, the Crazy Backwards, and all the records you are. I wanted to ask in terms of studio creativity and tie in the Occam's 11 to that. Is there something there where you kind of you just have a baseline that you go for? How much do you get caught up, in other words, in the minutia of recording in terms of creativity? Because it doesn't seem to block you as it does.
Well, if you're asking me, I tend to work with engineers I know who I trust. Andy, do we ever listen to takes back? Never.
No. No.
Never. We never listened to, I've never listened to takes of anything since I started recording in 1976, because back in those days, when I learned in what was left of the old studio system from real engineers and real studios, they said, musicians don't listen to takes. The producer and engineer do. It's a waste of time. You could just do another take. And that's the way it used to be. You know, the Wrecking Crew, when they did stuff, they didn't get up and go in the other room and listen to a take. No. They just did a good take, or if there was a problem, they trust the producer and he tells them to do another take. So I think a key thing is not getting caught up in listening to yourself when you're recording, for me.
That's great.
Yeah, but I would say that you have a command of the sonics that is unlike anybody I've ever heard, in the sense that you may not, and I don't know, I've never actually asked you this. I don't know how much you actually know is going to come out before it comes out, or if you've just been in all these places sonically and you kind of know where you're a direction that you're drawing.
No,
from,
it's a trip to discover things. And one of the secrets with me, which I will admit here, is I don't pay any attention to melody, harmony, and rhythm. I have no interest. All I pay attention to is timbre, is tone color, and melody, harmony, and rhythm are a product of that. While most people aren't thinking about timbre all the time. So I think of that as when I'm playing myself, when I do a mix, when I listen to a record, I'm thinking about timbres and shapes and colors and space. So here's a funny story. So I'm a little kid and I'm in, I think, 7th grade. And they say, hey, kids, we're going to put 10 of you on a bus and send you to LA with your parents' blessing, and you'll be paid to stay in a hotel. And this Miss Blevins is going to chaperone you, and you're all going to take two or 3 days of tests at this institute place where they're studying kids. And I got permission, and I went down to LA, and they gave an insane amount of tests in all kinds of things. And they did tests of listening to musical notes on headphones and identifying them, and music stuff, all kinds of things. And at the end, the guy who was the head of the place, who was a guy named Johnson O'Connor, I remember, called me into the room and he said, hey, I've got to tell you, if you want to be happy in life, there's 2 things you must never do. Never. I said, what are those, Mr. O'Connor? He said, you must never be an accountant. You have no aptitude for being an accountant. Okay. He says, you must never do music because you have 0 aptitude for being a musician. And I went, well, I don't want to do it. He says, but. I said, what? He says, well, we did this test in timbre recognition where we play the same note on 6 different instruments, and then you're supposed to identify, we play the 6 notes, then they send you away for half hour, then they play you 1 note, and they say, which of those other notes? And it was 10 things like that. So you're the only person who's ever gotten a perfect score, but recognizing timbres has no use. So that was a funny thing. And then when I was in college, the first year, I took a course in Hindustani music, how structured grammar and stuff like that. And in those days, you'd go to the language lab and you'd listen to reel tapes as part of your assignment. Okay, so here's now let's listen to Vilayat Khan playing Rag Dabari Kannada. Now we're going to hear Amir Khan, singing Rag Marwa, and you'd listen to all these things. Okay. And you'd play some in class, but then you'd have to go listen to the whole hour, sidelong performances in the language lab. And part of the exam was they had a listening test where they'd put something on and you had to identify what raga it was and who the musician was and stuff like that. So they put it on and everybody's there in the room. And as soon as they put it down, the first note starts, I put my hand up and say, that's Amir Khan. And this kind of goes on, and I get everything instantly before anybody else. And the guy says, how are you doing this? And I said, okay, put on another record. And he's playing LPs. And he puts it down, puts in the lead-in grooves. And before the music starts, I tell him what it is. And he's like, how'd you do that? And I say, well, the static and the grooves sound different on every record. And I remember that. I remember what the surface noise is like. So I have a perfect timbral memory for remembering timbres, not melodies or rhythms, unless I sort of encode them as timbres. It's weird.
Well, no, and the scratchiness on a record even you picked up on. So It makes a lot of sense.
You know, it sounds different on every record, the surface noise.
Yeah.
The teachers, incidentally, was a guy who wrote some books later on, Alan Silver, Brian Silver, one of those two names. I'm not remembering which right now, but anyway, it was really good. I'd seen a lot of live Hindustani music, which has always been really important to me. Growing up in the Bay Area, you'd see Ali Akbar Khan and Nikhil Banerjee and Young Zakir and Ali Rakan and all those guys. And to take a course where I understood the grammar and how the music worked before I played guitar means if I do use musical theory, I tend to interpret everything as raga theory rather than as Western harmony or modes or things like that. That's the way I think about, and I think about, switching to different ragas and stuff over each chord. That's how I think about it.
That's great. On that note, how crucial do you think it is? And back to you, Andy. We'll start with you on how crucial do you think it is? It's suggesting to a young person studying, or anyone some age studying, to listen to world music, to hear some Japanese music, some Burundi music, some Turkish music, some Irish music. How crucial would you say that is to really, explore something other than kind of what you hear in Western?
Yeah, well, it depends. I mean, the thing is, I think some of you guys know that I also have or had a career in software and computers, and for me, it's like I remember distinctly the time that I understood what routing is and how the internet worked. And this was a concept that completely blew my mind. And it was one of these things where I was like, wait a minute, everybody needs to know how this stuff works. But, that's not true, right? Everybody doesn't need to know. The people who want to know should know. So I guess I would say that, a lot of it is context. I mean, the thing is, we get a lot of appreciation and a sense of pleasure isn't the right word, but just, there's some kind of thing that feeds us when we hear the kinds of music that we're talking about. And it impacts us emotionally. Like I said, at the beginning, kind of becomes part of who you are. So I would say that the more exposure you have to things in a context that allows you to appreciate them, the better, but like, there's another quote I have from Chick, which I just have up on my other monitor here. I'm going to read here. And it says, art is a subject that is inundated with opinions. In fact, that is all it is about is opinions. And I just find that so profound because, we're talking about a thing in a context that we understand and appreciate. But, everyone isn't going to appreciate this. A lot of this music that we listen to or that we're talking about here has a sonic quality to it that unless you actually have the kind of reaction like Henry had, or like I had as I got introduced to it, you might not appreciate it. And that's fine. That's just, it's an opinion. Your opinion is formed on the context of everything that you've heard up until now. And so, if you're the kind of person that responds to music, I say learn as much as you can. Don't get stuck in different slots. I remember one time when I was at work, this woman said to me, "Oh, you're a musician? I love music. I just love Whitney Houston." And I was like, okay, yes, Whitney Houston is an accomplished singer. Her music does nothing for me. I mean, I could certainly analyze it from a technical standpoint and say yes, but I just thought it was a very narrow-minded kind of point of view. So this is another circular way of saying that, if you're the kind of person that responds to that type of thing and it makes you happy and you live your life without a feeling of lack of anything, fine, but for others who, want intellectual challenges or stimulation in different ways, I think it's really important to understand where things come from. I didn't know about Coltrane. I didn't know that Coltrane informed who John McLaughlin was in the way that he did, and all the steps along the way from Coltrane through Miles and Herbie and Chick and everybody else. I just didn't know. Maybe I didn't need to know, but it was kind of fun to find out in the back end of it. But so I say, yeah, learn as much as you can. Try and, you know, you can go down the rabbit hole every now and again, and it's a positive thing.
You know, I grew up in the days of free form and listener supported radio in the 60s when everything was on the radio. They'd play Ali Akbar Khan next to Albert Eiler, next to B.B. King, next to the Seeds, next to the Grateful Dead on the same radio show. And so I got exposed to all that stuff. And I got the McLaughlin Extrapolation album when it came out at Tower Records in Berkeley. And I knew about those things, to use the Mahavishnu example, before Mahavishnu, so I'd seen the path and I knew what was happening. And you'd think that would be easy now for kids with YouTube to go find stuff out, but actually it sends you so much towards promoted things. If you try to search around and find things, you're not going to find the best stuff very easily if you get to the edges of the map instead of if you're in the center of the map. And actually, we have a quiz question now. A footnote, we return to Whitney Houston.
Yeah.
What weird music guitar player played with Whitney Houston on one of her very first recordings?
I do not know. Do you?
Fred Frith, because she's on a Material record with Laswell before she has a career.
I was going to go with weird bass player T.M. Stevens, who plays on some of her stuff, but yes, Material.
No, it was way before that.
Sure. No, that's
way before that. She's on a Material record.
Yeah. Isn't Nona Hendrix on that record too? Or
probably. Yeah. Probably.
No, that's nice one. And nice obscure reference to the Seeds there. Right? That's
yes,
pushing too hard on me.
Pushing too hard, yeah.
No, that's great. You know what's great about your both of your comments, gentlemen, was I heard just accept vulnerability. We haven't heard it all. So just being able, and Andy, that story of Coltrane, so many people have said, yeah, sure. And it's that kind of like, oh no, I want to hear more. And we have that, that's kind of lost a little bit, but that's a great lesson for, again, it's someone out there saying, I want to be in touch with creativity. Just as a shout out to my dear friend who Anthony Garone, who put this site together and does so much hard work. One of the many things I admire about him is that's what he's like. When we're talking about music, he'll say, nope, I haven't heard of that. And so many people, you got to be macho. Oh yeah, I've got those records. So great reminder there for vulnerability. I wanted to make sure we get a couple of the questions from people on the thread. And we have one here from Paul Kazi. Sorry if I mispronounced that, Paul. And it's a question for Henry. And he mentions this incredible soundtrack. Did you meet Werner Herzog when you were doing the Encounters at the End of the World? And could you speak about that, meeting him? And
I met Werner many years before when I accidentally sat next to him on an airplane. And then I worked on his film Little Dieter Needs to Fly as a music advisor. Then I did Grizzly Man soundtrack. And then that movie I can't remember the title of, that's sort of the bad science fiction movie. I was a cameraman on that. And then on Encounters, I said, Werner, you want to go to Antarctica? He's like, sure. So I wrote a grant for him and we went there and we made Encounters at the End of the World. And I was a cameraman and soundtrack composer with David Lindley. And they made me the person who had to bell the cat. They made me the producer of the film. So when it got nominated for an Academy Award, that means I got nominated for an Academy Award.
That's awesome. That's a
we
great
really
movie,
want to make
if anyone hadn't seen it, you should put that in the list there.
Encounters at the End of the World. We want to make further Encounters at the End of the World with maybe just Werner as an executive producer. We talk about that. We think about going back. It'll be over 10 years when that's possible again. And there's many stories there to tell and how things have changed.
Wow. That's, so it's safe to say, Henry, you've played on all 5 continents, right? Is there a missing spot?
I played in Madagascar, but I haven't played on the African continent.
Okay, interesting. Is that technically? I think we give you a point on that.
It's an island. It's not. No, New Zealand's not one of the 5 continents.
You're right. To be fair, okay. So
Madagascar's not. So I have not played on the African continent, but everywhere else pretty much.
That's and Antarctica's, question for Andy from from Alberto Lanes. Apologize again if I mispronounce. Andy, given changes in the music industry we've experienced in our lifetime, do you think we'll ever see the intricate showcases we were witness to in past decades?
Wait a minute. What is that question again? How does that go?
It's Alberto's asking, given changes in the music industry that we've seen in our lifetime, do you think we'll see the intricate showcases that we've seen in past decades? So,
well, yeah. I mean, I think they're happening now. I mean, I it's just a question of the visibility of it, right? I mean, there's amazing. I mean, even Anthony. By the way, Anthony, I didn't mention that I really liked your commentary on, the. Now I'm drawing a blank on the album. The piano player and the bass player from Israel, Avishai Cohen. The comment on that album, on the couple of albums, and you listen to that stuff, and those albums are, 8 years old now, 10 years old, kind of, maybe even a little longer. I mean, the complexity and the intricacy of the musicianship is just incredible on that. Along those lines, I listened to a guy, I forget, I'm going to mispronounce this, Tigran Hamyasin or something.
I like his stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's everywhere. I just think it's just not as visible because there's so much noise surrounding things,
That's great. And yeah, and you and I have talked about that, about how there's so much great music, and it's a matter of training some kind of new filters to pull it in. So yeah, that's okay. That's Alberto. There you go. Swinging back to this new record too, because my view is that it's kind of like the Akashic record. It doesn't matter time. We've talked about stuff from all different decades, but I also like to focus on what folks are doing as artists right now. So the Occam's 11, is that what you?
We'll just call it that for the moment.
Yeah, this is right. And what's the lineup on that? Is that also Jeff Sipe and who's
No.
on that? No.
I'll do it. It's Lucas Ligeti on drums, the son of the composer Georgi Ligeti. And it's Andy on bass and me on guitar and Chris Muir, my old pal, person I played music with longest, on guitar, and Stefan Thalen from Sonar on guitar.
Oh, wow. Sonar has been just doing some great stuff. Okay. And where is that is that the summer it's out, or you don't know?
I could master it the rest of by next week. And then we'll see if there's a label that wants it. We'll find out.
Oh, great.
It's kind of like grandson of 5 Times Surprise with Andy and I, kind of, in a way. Do you think it's like that, Andy?
Well, again, the approach is like it, but the musicianship is different. It's more. I don't mean the music. I mean about the. It's our continuing history. You're in mine. Yeah, I would say that. Oh, you know what? One thing I didn't mention was the whole Mistakes era, which
yes,
I think is indicative of another kind of thing. I mean, you have Mike Keneally, who is, most of us who know and love Mike and his music consider him, an alien genius kind of individual.
It's insane. It's impossible. Nobody's like that.
Yeah, nobody's like that. And he's done the spectrum of music that he's played is just incredible. But if you listen to a lot of his solo albums, which I love, and to me they're like reading, a David Foster novel or James Joyce or something. They're so deep and complex and multi-layered. And yet I know that many people, when they hear that, it's like, is this an opera? Is this rock? What is this? It's like they don't have a box to put it in. So, in terms of creativity and that kind of thing, again, it's another type of situation where you have to really open your mind and say, what is it?
Yeah. No, that's well, I'd love to talk about the mistakes. The one problem I have with this show is it's not 3 hours long. So but no, of course, for folks who don't know that, chase that down. Go ahead.
I was going to tell you one thing about the mistakes. This is so weird. there's a note that Henry put on that record. It's not a note because he doesn't play notes, according to him. But it's a sound that happens at one particular time, and I'd have to go back and find it. But there's two notes or 2 points of music that are like that for me. One is on a Dregs album where Steve hits a note on his guitar that just sustains, and it's like every time I hear that song and I hear that note, I just think this is like, it flips me out into another dimension. The same thing happens on the Mistakes album, and it's just this weird little sound that is just perfectly in there. So I think Henry just did it.
No idea.
I don't think
which
he
one.
said, I'm going to put the perfect note in there. It just happened.
Yeah, I think I can hear in my head the one you're talking about. Yeah, and that happens just rarely in music. There's on Pork Pie Hat by Jeff Beck. There's a note he does, and you're just like, that's not on a
I know. Isn't that great when you have a note that takes you there?
And you guys have done that a bunch of times. But no, just to pause for a second and say Mistakes, Mike Keneally, who's got some new stuff out. There's an interview we have, new one from him. In the many blessings in my musical life, I saw the first Zappa tour in 1988. First time Mike Keneally, was in. And let me tell you, on that stage of 12 people or whatever, within 10 minutes, it was like, who's that guy? Because he's playing everything. And what is he doing? And so we love Mike, and it's great. Not also Prairie Prince.
Was the drummer in the Mistakes?
Yeah.
Amazing, a super drummer.
Just incredible. And let's talk a little bit about that for a second. Just, you guys did 2 records and a few shows.
There's one record, and there's a live record that never came out.
Oh, okay. Maybe there's been snippets of it, but I remember hearing some live. But what was the process for that record? The live improv and then, or songs plus improv? Which direction did it?
It was a lot of songs, and some of them had improv in them, but that's kind of a song record where we each had stuff to present that we did, and Mike did the lyrics.
We all brought things in, and that's what came out. But I would say that, I've heard a lot of Prairie's drumming, and I can tell you that playing with him, he was, again, another one of these guys like Jeff Sipe, Rod Morgenstein. They're just super drummers. I know. Yeah, just incredible. And I haven't heard him play like that on any other record.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. I remember seeing him when he was in Journey when I was a little kid at Winterland, and then playing the Beatles' "It's All Too Much" in the first Journey with Neil Schon and Prairie on drums. And that was actually, he played, like as good as the best Keith Moon. I'd never heard anybody play right.
Is it just me, or did we lose
drums that liked records?
It's just a little glitchy there.
I'm here now. Can you hear me?
We got you, Henry. Okay. Yeah.
So let me mention one more thing. Mr. Keneally and Andy and I and Morgan Ogren are about to do a show for my weekly show, probably to air in May, where we do E. Cummings poems as music in our own interpretations of them.
Okay.
Which is something we talk about doing for an album someday too, but we're going to put our toes in the water with the E. Cummings poems.
Just staggering, just great, and yeah, just we got to get Prairie on the show because he's a dear friend, and he, like you said, you don't know what the man's going to do, and there's always something new. He's about to do a month of gigs, actually streaming gigs, starting this weekend with Todd. So
cool.
Yeah. So, but folks who have not heard the Mistakes record, it's available on Keneally's website, and it's.
It is? I thought it was out of print.
It's digital only.
It's digital. Yeah. It's on there. So, but really great record, and again, it lives on that borderline of songs and the more exploratory, experimental things.
And you can see us playing live again in my weekly show, not meaning to plug it, but it's there. There's a wonderful live gig in Santa Cruz with Prairie's curtain partner, Diana Mangano, on vocals, and Buckethead on bass and guitar with us. I I mean, it's nuts.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a great reminder. Um, so just a couple more questions, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time tonight and or this afternoon where you are. And but just a couple more questions. Uh, before we get to another question, I wanted to ask again about a recent project. Again, that you touched on it, the 5 times surprise. Um, is there is that going to circle back around? Because a lot of people,
It
right?
could. I mean, we all could have. We could easily play together. We could easily make another record. But somebody, we were given a recording studio for free for that if we let the class of a teacher there come in and watch. So
Oh.
that's how that record was. We were be able to afford to make it. And my friend Ed Pedersen, the producer, arranged that deal and was super helpful with a lot of things.
That's great. And let's pause for a second. And wow, Jeff Sipe, another one that both of you have done so much with. And
Monster.
anyone out there, if you're watching this channel and Jeff Sipe's not on your radar, wow, a million different directions the man goes and still goes. So okay, great. Well, it's a question from Paul Kazi, and it overlaps with the question that I have, and it's a question for Henry. And he's saying you've worked with pretty much all of my guitar heroes, and he lists Frith and Derek Bailey, Mary Harvison, and I'll also say Lindley and Frizzell, Eugene, Zoogs Rift, Elliott Sharp. You've worked with all these people. Is there someone that's on your list that you're like, I want to work with that person? Is there?
I've got most of them. And it's funny, people I've worked with who I really loved, where it never came out. Ron Montrose had me play on a record with him, but it never came out.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's it. Well, hope it does. Hope it does. And I want my first record listening to you, I was very young, was Remarrying for Money, where you had all these other guitarists. And then I thank you for that because it turned me on to.
I love guitar. I wish I could play with Terry Ripdahl. It's kind of late in the game, but I wish I could play with Terry Ripdahl if I could play with anybody.
Well, it's never too late. Andy, is there someone on your list where you say, I'd like to work with that person?
Oh gosh, well,
it's a tough spot question, but
yeah,
careful.
No, I mean,
we're going to think of a
really
record to
haven't
make
thought
if you
because
say it.
at this point in life, I just kind of am strolling through. It's like I feel very fortunate to have the opportunities I've had, and more will come. And I think it's cool. And I don't have a lot of desire. There's so many great musicians that I'd be scared to play with. But
Isn't there somebody, Andy?
oh,
Like we thought it would be cool to play with Jeff Sipe, and then we did. Who else would be cool to play with?
yeah, well, actually, Steve Roach. I don't think you know who he is, Henry.
I know
but
who he is. Yeah.
Yeah, is someone who I had contact with a couple of years ago, and I just love his music. His music is so deep, and I don't know what I would do there, but something would come of it.
That's great, and that kicks off another quick point. That Andy, you've done so much beautiful synthesizer music, and I think I often meet people who don't realize that, and that you're a big synth guy, and you have the zaza and stuff, the meditative stuff. What is there anything in that direction that you may be working on the synthesis electronic thing?
Well, I mean, when you talk about it, this whole thing started off on creativity. I mean, I do want to make a point that it comes at you from different places. So the other day I downloaded a new plugin for a synthesizer, and I just started, screwing around with it, and immediately I kind of heard a song coming out of it. So I put it into Logic, and I was tweaking it and kind of playing with the tempo and just a couple of sounds. And so, it goes in my bucket of a million different snippets that may or may not turn into a song. But, while I was doing it, I was in the zone and having a great time and felt really, really good. Felt great to be alive.
It's as you've said before, it's an exciting time with all these synth technology, both hardware and software. So that's a great that's a great reminder that the creativity comes from a lot of different directions. It can come from a piece of gear, and certainly we've both seen you both explore with a lot of gear, especially Henry with just it's always a pedal experience.
Wait,
Yeah.
I want to ask Andy one question, because people who
Right.
are not aware of his Zazen musical career,
Yeah.
Andy, how many albums did you make, Zazen?
Oh God, it was at least 12, I think.
Yeah, and nobody noticed about that.
Yeah, it's
Not
crazy.
enough. Yeah, it's I love it. I'm a big synth guy, so I'm always telling people, and I love it because there's always this really that's so folks, do your research there too, because some wonderful stuff. One thing that's come up too is listening, as I said before. But you both have touched base, and you do in other interviews on you still have that joy of music, and that's really great. You're always listening and recommending stuff, and I think that's a lesson for people that don't forget that you love music, and
Yeah.
and you haven't said that, but I get that from you a lot. As a matter of fact, I met you both because of working. I met you as fans of seeing someone else, because me working for different artists.
Yep.
You've been so that's so it shows that you want to hear music, you want to get out, and I think that's one of my suggestions to folks. So, well, guys, this has been great. People, we're going to have some links on here. We're going to let people know how to find you. We're looking forward to the new record, whatever it ends up being called, the temporary name, Occam's 11. And we invite folks, please check out Henry's website and check out the Cuneiform events that he's doing. This
Yeah,
sounds
you want to go to YouTube and look for the Cuneiform Records YouTube page, Cuneiform. That's what you want to do. My website, there's nothing there.
Oh, okay.
Doesn't even mention that. Go to the Cuneiform. I'm not
Great.
self-promotional.
Okay, that's so, folks. You can find that. Before we wrap, I just want to invite everyone to the next couple of things. The other show I'm doing is every other Wednesday. It's called The Gear Spotlight, and the first episode is coming up this Wednesday, the 17th, with Adam Holtzman, who's going to walk us through his rig and talk about the new Steven Wilson record and playing with Miles Davis and a lot of different things. But that's kind of for the gearheads. We're going to have this show with, of course, a lot of music topics. 2 weeks from tonight, we've got another Confronting Creativity with another wonderful pair of gentlemen, Carmine Rojas and Zach Alford, and bass player and drummer from David Bowie at different times, but also for Billy Joel and the B-52s and Rod Stewart and Nectar. And between them, they've played with an incredible amount of people. So please join us. 2 weeks from tonight is the 26th. We're going to have Carmine Rojas and Zach Alford. And check our schedule. We've also got Tom Fowler and Chester Thompson coming up. We've got a lot of great stuff. But I mean, tonight, folks, go out there, look at the discographies of these men, which is also a couple hundred records. And please check out what they've done and stay in touch with them. We will have them back on Make Weird Music, because they're two of our favorite people. Looks like we got a signal breakdown with Henry. But thanks for being here. I will see you. Oh, here he is.
Wait for a second.
Okay. And folks know they can also find me at Guitar Tour. That's where I am on various socials, or on Make Weird Music always. And we've got a four-legged friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The house links.
That's great.
I really appreciate this, Andre, and both you and Anthony are great people.
Yes.
And there's endless conversation. It always feels very natural just to talk to you guys. So thank you for doing this.
Very
Thank you so much.
much appreciated.